government spending in exchange for an agreement to raise the debt ceiling. Take a look at the U.S. national debt clock, $14.4 trillion and climbing. So will Washington reach a deal to avoid any kind of debt default issue? Here now, fresh from today's White House meeting, is Republican Policy Committee Chairman Congressman Tom Price of Georgia and Vermont Democratic Congressman Peter Welch. Congressman Price, I'll begin with you. Take us inside the meeting. What was said? What was reached?
Well, it was cordial, but the message that we delivered is that in order to get jobs, we've got to decrease spending at the federal level. We've got to make certain that we put in place structural changes to the way we budget around here so that we don't continue to spend ourselves into oblivion. The American people are demanding that we not spend the way that we are right now so that we can invigorate the private sector and create jobs. The president, as he does most of the time, says the right things and then doesn't do the right things. And so what we have asked him to do is to say the right things and do the right things so we can actually work in a bipartisan way to create jobs.
Congressman Welch, hey, what Congressman Price said sounds pretty good. I mean, do you think we're any closer to reaching a deal? Everybody's saying the right things.
Well, that's the problem. I'm skeptical about our ability to reach this deal, which would be desirable to reach by August 2, which is basically the drop dead date on the default. And we're playing with real economic fire here. We're playing Russian roulette with a loaded gun. The American economy is on the receiving end. If we default for the first time in the history of this country, that is going to do devastating damage to the American economy. Interest rates go up, the cost of a mortgage, the cost of borrowing money for a car, all that goes up to great detriment to the American economy. So my view is, yes, negotiate. If our leadership can get to an agreement that helps us address this long-term structural imbalance, that's great. But don't default. Negotiate, don't default.
Well, Congressman Price, is there a real possibility, and if you think there is, try to lay some odds on it for our viewers, that we do not reach a deal?
Well, I think there's a possibility that we reach a deal. I think there's also a possibility that we don't reach a deal. Peter says that it'd be a disaster to default, and it would. But I'll tell you what would also be a disaster, and that is continuing these trillion-dollar deficits year after year after year. And so what Peter and folks in his party did yesterday is vote to raise the debt ceiling by over $2 trillion without any structural changes at all. That's what the American people said last November that they didn't want, and they don't want it because they know that it's destroying the fabric of our country and making it so that we can't create jobs and expand the private sector. We're pretty good at expanding the public sector. That's not where the jobs ought to be. But
Congressman Price, many Americans that are rational would also argue that you can't hit a debt ceiling, right?
Well, sure.
That if you hit that ceiling and nothing is done, it is an effective default.
Well, and you're absolutely right. But there are very few pinch points in politics. Very few times when you get the opportunity where the pressure comes to bear on everybody, Peter's party, my party, and the president, to say, look, we've got to fundamentally change things. We've got to correct the course we're on. This is one of those pinch points, which means short-term, mid-term, long-term solutions. Decrease spending in 2012, make certain that we've got spending caps in place for the next couple of years, and then big changes like fundamental entitlement reform, balanced budget amendment, those kinds of things that make it so that we never find ourselves in this situation again where we're mortgaging our kids and our grandkids' future as far as the eye can see.
Congressman Welch, what's the next step here? I mean, Americans, to be honest with you, are probably having a little bit of debt fatigue. When do we reach a solution? What's it going to take?
Actually, it's going to take a willingness on the part of the Republicans and the Democrats to put everything on the table. Tom focuses on spending as his party does. We've got to include the Pentagon. My view, we have to include tax expenditures like oil company tax breaks. And in fact, in my view, we have to include revenues. The goal has to be to get to fiscal balance like we had in the Clinton years. So this is a pinch point. Tom's right about that. And in politics, both sides use the leverage that's available to us. My view, this is a moment when both sides also have to exercise some restraint. Because if we allow this country to go into default, that will be a devastating blow to our economy and our reputation. America pays its bills. And these bills, incidentally, were incurred by Congresses that neither Tom nor I were part of for things that in some cases he supported and I didn't, and in some cases things I supported and he didn't. But a bill incurred is a bill to be paid.
We've got about a minute and a half. Very quickly, each of you, I would like to ask, starting with Congressman Welch, give us something that you would give up in exchange for deal. Give us one thing that you would do to make a concession to the other party. Congressman Welch.
Well, I'd give up ag subsidies. Some of the ag subsidies. I'd give up the ethanol subsidy. And some of the spending programs that Democrats have long championed, those are among them. I'd be willing to go down that road if we, in exchange, got to balance and also included revenues.
Congressman Price, same question to you. What would you give up to make a deal?
There's so many things that we could give up by decreasing the size of government and the scope and reach of government. The Department of Education does all sorts of things that we ought to have be done at the local and the state level. The Department of Energy is destroying jobs out there through the EPA and other organizations. We could significantly decrease the size and scope of the Department of Energy and do a significantly better job here at the federal level. So there are wonderful ways to decrease the scope of government and not have to continue this ridiculous spending.
See, I feel like the Kudlow report brought the two sides a little closer together tonight. Congressman Peter Welch and Tom Price, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, and that is it for tonight's show. I'm Brian Sullivan in for Larry. I'll be back tomorrow night. Could be a wild ride on Wall Street tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Have a great night. We will see you tomorrow, same time, on the Kudlow Report. Take care.
Money Politics is sponsored by Exxon.